Mason was alone, standing on a dusty battlefield that had long gone silent. Smoke still floated in the air. Broken weapons and burned machines lay scattered. The sky above was red, painted by the setting sun and the remains of war. He was a human. Engineer, not a soldier. Not a hero, just a man trying to repair a broken signal tower. The tower was tall but half destroyed, sparks flying from its bent frame. Mason climbed carefully, small toolkit hanging from his belt. He had one job: fix the COM relay and call for pickup before nightfall. But something felt strange, too quiet, too heavy, like the air was waiting for something. Then it happened. A huge shadow fell across the ground. Mason froze. At first, he thought it was a ship landing behind him. But then the earth shook, like footsteps, massive, slow, and full of power. He turned around slowly. What he saw made his mouth go dry. A giantess, she was at least 11 feet tall, covered in silver armor that glowed faintly with energy lines. Her long black hair was braided with metal cords, and her yellow eyes burned like twin suns. She looked down at him with a fierce, unreadable expression. Her face was sharp and strong, her voice low like thunder. "You are not all Rothi," she said. "Why are you here?" Mason swallowed hard, raising both hands. I'm just fixing the tower," he said quickly. "I don't want trouble." The giantess stepped closer. The ground trembled under her feet. For a moment, Mason thought she would crush him like an ant. Instead, she tilted her head. Her gaze lingered on him, especially his eyes. Mason, nervous and trying to be polite, pointed at her armor. "It's beautiful," he said, the moment those words left his mouth. The air changed. The giantess gasped. The soldiers behind her, at least 6 other towering figures, froze in place. Eyes wide, one dropped his weapon. "You dare speak such words?" she asked, her voice soft but dangerous. Mason blinked. Yes. I just meant, your armor looks cool." She took a step forward, now towering right in front of him. Her giant hand reached out, hand grabbed his arm tightly. Mason yelped. In surprise, to speak those words, she said slowly, "To a warrior of my rank. It's not just flattery, it is a proposal." Mason's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Wait, proposal. Like marriage. The soldiers around them muttered to each other in deep voices. Is he brave or stupid? He knows the ancient vow. Perhaps he is the chosen one. The giantess did not smile, but her grip did not loosen either. "You will now fulfill your duty," she said, as if it was law. "You have claimed me, and I accept." Mason panicked. No. It's just a compliment. I didn't mean anything by it." But it was too late. Orothea tradition had already accepted the words, and her tribe had already begun to celebrate before he could protest more. She lifted him gently but firmly off the ground and carried him over her shoulder like a sack of supplies. Mason shouted, "This is a misunderstanding. A big one." But the giantess only said one word. "Mine." They arrived at a massive war camp surrounded by tall bone totems and burning torches. Everything was built for giants, tents the size of houses, weapons that looked like tree trunks, and warriors who eyed him with a mix of curiosity and respect. He was placed in a large tent filled with thick blankets and food that smelled. Strange guards stood outside, though they didn't look like they planned to harm him. Instead, they bowed slightly when he passed, calling him the bonded. He was not a prisoner. He was something else. Something important. Later that night, the giantess entered, now without her helmet. Her face was strong but calm, and her eyes softer now. "I am Valkyra, daughter of the Storm Circle," she said, sitting beside him. "You have honored me with your words." Mason sat on the floor, confused and exhausted. "Valkyra, I swear, I didn't know it was a proposal." She looked at him for a long time. then gave a small nod. Then let us see if fate chose well. Mason blinked. What does that mean? She stood up and walked out, her voice fading as she spoke. Tomorrow, you begin the trials. If you pass them, you will be my mate. If you fail, you will still belong to me. Mason stared at the tent walls, wide-eyed. He had come here to fix a tower. Now he was stuck in a warrior camp, engaged to a giantess, and about to take trials he knew nothing about, all because he said one polite sentence. "Oh no," he whispered to himself. "What have I done?" Morning came fast in the all-wrathy war camp. But Mason had barely slept. His mind was spinning, with fear, confusion, and the strange smell of alien spices. The blankets were warm, the tent massive, but it didn't feel like safety. It felt like a cage, soft, clean, but still a cage. Outside, drums beat a slow rhythm. Warriors sang deep songs in a language he didn't understand. And then the flap of his tent opened. Valkyra stood there taller than ever in the daylight. No helmet this time, just long braids of dark hair. Armor shining like polished silver. Her golden eyes looked straight at him. "It is time," she said simply. Mason stood up, legs weak. "Time for what, exactly?" he asked, though he feared the answer. "The first trial," she replied. "If you are to be my mate, you must prove yourself to my people." "But I told you," Mason said, holding up his hands. "I didn't mean the compliment that way." Valkyra stepped closer. "To speak those words to a warrior is sacred. In my culture, your intent does not matter. Only your honor." Mason sighed. "So, if I don't do these trials, then you bring shame to me," she said, voice growing. "Cold and I will be forced to fight you and win you by conquest." Mason's eyes widened. "Okay, trials it is," he said quickly. They brought him to the center of the camp, where a ring of warriors watched silently. Some had skin of stone, others wore beast bones as armor. Every one of them towered over him. In the middle of the circle stood a massive stone wheel with a thick rope tied to it. "The trial of will," announced Valkyra. "Pull the wheel across the sacred circle without falling." Mason stared at it. "It weighs more than a car," he whispered. But the warriors only crossed their arms and waited. Mason grabbed the rope, his arms shaking already. He pulled with all his strength. Nothing happened. He gritted his teeth, pulled against till nothing. Sweat rolled down his face, his arms screamed in pain. Then he remembered his training physics. Angles, leverage. He looped the rope around a nearby pole, created a pulley using his belt buckle and a metal bar. The wheel moved just an inch, but it moved. The warriors gasped. No brute strength, but cleverness. Inch by inch, he dragged the wheel across the ring. When it crossed the line, Mason collapsed, breathing hard, but the crowd began to murmur. "Clever, smart like fire. He has the mind of a builder." Valkyra knelt beside him and offered a drink from a glowing flask. He sipped it, and energy surged through his limbs. Not human energy, something else. Alien herbs, strong and strange. The next trial was worse. He had to survive a mock hunt in the forest near the camp. He was given no weapons, just a pack of tools and a single flare. He ran through thick red trees, dodging strange beasts and traps. At one point, a four-eyed predator leaped from the trees, fangs bared. Mason used a mirror shard to blind it. Then threw a smoke bomb made from local moss. He escaped, but barely, when he returned to camp. The crowd was silent at first. Then, one by one, they thumped their fists against their chests, a sign of respect. Even the youngest warriors looked at him with awe. Valkyra stood proud. "He passed," she said. "Both trials, mind and survival." Later, inside her tent, Mason was given real food, not just warrior rations, but cooked meat and sweet fruit. He sat across from Valkyra, trying to understand her. "Why do your people take compliments so seriously?" he asked. Valkyra leaned back. "In our history, words built nations and destroyed them. To speak from the heart means you are ready to give yourself. To compliment a warrior's armor is the same as touching her soul." Mason blinked, and nobody ever accidentally says something like that. She gave a rare smile. "Not often, and never during a battle. You were either foolish or fated." Mason stared at her, so big, so powerful. And yet there was something calm behind her strength. "I just said your armor looked cool," he muttered. She chuckled. "And I have not taken it off since. You gave me pride. Now I offer you a future." Mason felt dizzy. This was too fast, too strange, too big, but somehow he didn't hate it. Outside, the drums began again. Another trial tomorrow. And something told him this one would test more than just his body or mind. It would test his heart. He looked at Valkyra. She looked back. No smiles, no softness, just fire and strength. But in that fire, he saw something else. A warrior looking for someone who could stand beside her. Not above, not below, beside. Mason didn't know if he was ready, but he was still here. And that meant something, maybe. The compliment wasn't a mistake, after all. The next day, the sky was gray. Clouds rolled low over the mountain range behind the Orathi camp. The warrior said it was a sign storm season was coming. But for Mason, the real storm was already here. He stood in the center of a large training ground. Still sore from yesterday's trials, his muscles ached, his back felt tight. And he hadn't slept much. But around him, dozens of giant warriors gathered, watching silently. Valkyra stood at the edge of the circle, arms crossed, her sharp eyes focused only on him. "Today," she said, her voice like distant thunder, "you face the third trial. It is the trial of spirit." Mason blinked. "What's that?" "Like ... a speech test." A warrior stepped forward, holding a wooden staff twice as tall as Mason. He slammed it into the ground and growled, "You will face us one by one in challenges of courage, balance, and control. You must not cry out, must not run. You must face every test without breaking." Mason's stomach dropped. So it wasn't a speech test. It was pain, it was pressure, it was personal. The first challenge began. He was told to walk barefoot across a long path of heated stones. Each step burned. Every instinct told him to jump off, to scream. But he clenched his teeth and walked. Step by step, he reached the end. Legs trembling, but never cried out. The next trial, hold a large metal disc above his head while standing on 1 foot on top of a wooden pole. The pole wobbled. The disc was heavy. Time dragged. The crowd said nothing, just watched. Minutes felt like hours. He nearly fell twice, but he didn't give up. Valkyra said nothing, but her gaze followed his every move. Mason didn't know if she was impressed or silently judging. Either way, he couldn't stop. Not now. Then came the final test. The challenge of fear. He was brought to a dark cave at the edge of camp. No weapons, no light, only a small glowing crystal. "Go inside and bring back the symbol," the warrior said. But no. "It sees you." Mason didn't ask what it was. He just took the crystal and walked in. The cave was silent, except for his footsteps and dripping water. As he moved deeper, strange sounds echoed around him, whispers, growls, something dragging across stone. His heart pounded, but he kept walking. He found the symbol, a stone with the mark of the Orathi carved into it. Just as he picked it up, he heard a deep, wet growl behind him. He turned. Dan saw glowing eyes staring at him. A creature twice his height, covered in black fur, and scars crawled out of the shadows. Its mouth opened wide, sharp teeth dripping with venom. Mason didn't run. He didn't scream. He raised the glowing crystal and held it high. blinding the beast for just one moment. Then he threw a pocket flare at the wall, exploding with light and heat. The cave shook, the beast roared in pain and rage, but Mason ran past it, out of the cave, into the daylight. Clutching the marked stone in his arms, the crowd gasped as he fell to his knees, smoke still rising from his clothes. Cuts on his arms, his face pale, but still. He was alive. Valcora stepped forward slowly. She knelt before him, took the stone, and held it high. "He has faced the third trial," she announced, and did not break. The warriors beat their chests 3 times, an ancient gesture of deep respect. No laughter, no jokes, only silence and pride. That night, Mason sat inside Valcora's tent again, this time with a bowl of warm broth and soft bread-like food. He ate slowly, staring into the small fire pit. Valcora sat across from him, quiet, thoughtful. "You were afraid in the cave," she said at last, not as a question, but as a statement. Mason nodded. "Yes, I was, but I didn't let fear win." She leaned closer. "In my world, strength is not the body alone. To fear and still move forward, that is the spirit of a true mate." Mason looked up at her, tired but honest. "I didn't come here to be anyone's mate," he said softly. "I just wanted to survive." Valcora's voice grew even softer. "And now you do more than survive. You endure." He didn't reply right away, but he realized something. Somewhere in the middle of these impossible trials, he had stopped trying to escape, not because he was trapped, but because something inside him had changed. Valcora stood, towering over him once again, but this time she offered her hand, not as a captor, not as a commander. As something else. Mason took it, and for the first time, he didn't feel small. He felt like he belonged. Mason sat outside the giant tent, the cool night wind brushing against his skin. He looked up at the stars, many unfamiliar, glowing in strange shapes. He was on a planet far from Earth, surrounded by warriors, trials, and a giantess who thought he belonged to her. And yet, he wasn't afraid anymore, just confused. He had passed 3 trials. He had earned respect. But still, was this really what he wanted? To stay in a camp of towering alien warriors? To become the mate of Valcora, the undefeated war leader? He missed Earth, missed the quiet hum of machines, coffee from vending pods, and the sound of bad music in the repair station. His thoughts were broken by a voice, deep and rough. "You think too loudly." Small one. Mason turned. It was Thurnok, Valcora's second in command, a towering Allrothi with thick stone-like skin and glowing red tattoos. Thurnok had never smiled at him, not even once. "You do not belong here," Thurnok said bluntly. "Yet you keep passing trials." Mason gave a weak smile. "Yeah, I get that a lot." Thurnok sat beside him, the ground groaning under his weight. He handed Mason a folded cloth. Inside was a key card, small, thin, and human-made. Mason's eyes widened. "This is from the crashed scout ship." Thurnok nodded. "You fix machines, don't you?" "There's a half-broken flyer in the storage cave. This card will start it if you really want to leave." Mason stared at it. "Leave. Go back to human space. Escape all of this giants. Trials, responsibilities, emotions." He stood up slowly. "Why are you giving me this?" he asked. "I thought you didn't like me." Thurnok didn't answer right away. He simply stood too, looking toward Valcora's tent. "She was never supposed to take a mate. But since you arrived, she sleeps less, speaks less, and smiles more." Mason's heart skipped. Was that true? Had he really changed her? Even a little. Thurnok walked away without another word, leaving Mason alone with the stars and the keycard. The storage cave was quiet and dark. He used a small torch to light his way at the back of the cave. Under canvas tarps and broken weapons, he found the flyer, small, battered and old but human design. He entered the cockpit and inserted the card. The system flickered. Lights blinked. "Welcome." "Technician Mason Reed," the ship said in a dull voice. "Flight systems 30% operational." It would fly, not perfectly, but enough to escape. He reached toward the ignition, then stopped. His hand hovered over the switch. He could leave right now. No more trials. No more confusion. No more giant woman calling him mate. But then he heard shouting far outside the cave. Voices yelling, horns blaring, weapons clashing. His heart dropped. Something was wrong. He rushed out of the cave. Smoke rose from the far side of the camp. Fire lit the night sky. A rival Ulrithi clan had launched a surprise attack. Warriors screamed, shields slammed, arrows flew. And in the center of it Valcora, holding a massive battle axe covered in blood and dust, fighting off 3 enemies at once. Mason's breath caught in his chest. Without thinking, he ran straight toward the chaos. He had no weapon, no armor, only a small toolkit and the fire in his heart. He dodged under giant legs, ducked flying spears, and climbed onto a wrecked cart. From there, he saw the enemy's siege engine, rolling metal beast with a flame cannon pointed right at Valcora. He grabbed a flare from his belt and jumped. He slammed it into the engine's side right into its power chamber. It exploded in a flash of green fire. The shockwave knocked several enemies down, gave Valcora the opening she needed. With a war cry, she brought her axe down and shattered the enemy leader's blade. The rest scattered, fleeing into the darkness. The battle was over, but the cost was high. Warriors wounded. Tents burned, smoke everywhere. Valcora stood tall in the middle, breathing hard, her armor cracked, blood on her cheek, and then she saw him, Mason, standing not far, covered in dust, breathing heavy but alive. She walked toward him slowly. The camp watched in silence. "You could have escaped," she said, voice low. "I gave you the chance. Why did you return?" Mason met her gaze. "I saw you, and I couldn't leave." She stared at him, unreadable. Then she knelt before him, one knee to the ground, not in weakness, but in honor, in my people's eyes. "You are no longer a trial taker," she said. "You are a warrior." Mason stepped forward, looked around at the warriors who once doubted him, then looked down at the giantess who once terrified him. He gently touched her shoulder. "I'm not ready to be a mate," he said softly, "but I'll fight beside you until I am." Valcora smiled, not wide, but real. And it was the first time Mason felt like he truly belonged. The morning after the battle, smoke still curled in the sky. Half the camp was damaged. Warriors limped through the paths, and some tents lay in ruins. But the Ulroth did not mourn like humans. They rebuilt quickly with silence, strength, and stubborn hands. Mason walked among them, helping where he could. He carried water buckets, passed out bandages, and even climbed onto damaged towers to repair solar lanterns. The warriors no longer looked at him with doubt. Now they nodded in respect. Some even thumped their chests in greeting. He was still small, still weak compared to them, but he had done something that not even the strongest warrior had done last night. He had turned the tide of battle, with only a flare and foolish courage. Valcora stood on a large stone at the edge of the camp, overlooking the valley. She wore new armor, freshly cleaned, and her wounds were bandaged. Mason climbed up beside her, both of them silent for a while. "You have brought shame to my enemies," she said at last. "An honor to my name." Mason gave a small laugh. "I almost got killed doing it." Valcora nodded. "That is the Ulrothi way." He looked up at her. "Is there another trial coming?" She looked at him now, her golden eyes steady. "There is always one more trial," she said. "But the next one is not given by the tribe. It is the trial of choice." Mason frowned. "What?" Do you mean? She stepped closer. You must decide what you truly are. A visitor, a warrior, or my mate. Mason's breath caught. He looked down at the campfires burning low, people rebuilding, children carrying water jugs bigger than his torso, and then he looked back at Valkyra. She wasn't just a giant warrior. She was a leader, a protector, someone who took pride in her people. And somehow, in all of this, she had made space for him before he could answer. A loud cry echoed across the hills. It wasn't an all-Rothy voice. It was deeper, more mechanical. Enemy war machine approaching. A scout shouted. Everyone ran toward the east ridge. There. Rising over the hills came a walking fortress. It stood 3 stories tall, stomping with steel legs and bristling with weapons. A relic from the old wars, controlled by the rival clan that had fled the night before. The camp panicked. The beast had heavy plasma cannons, thick armor, and could crush walls with 1 foot. Valkyra drew her axe, formed defense lines. She shouted. Mason ran to her side. That thing's too powerful. Your weapons won't stop it. We'll die trying, she said firmly. No, Mason said quickly. Let me try something. He ran back to the storage cave, grabbed a roll of human EMP charges and tools from his old crash pack, then sprinted toward the moving war machine. The Orath shouted after him. Where is he going? He'll be crushed. Valkyra watched with wide eyes. He was running a lawn toward death. Mason reached the back of the metal giant. He climbed up the side using old bolts and hanging cables. The machine groaned and hissed, turrets turning, sensors activating. He reached the power port near the top, slammed the EMP charge into the socket. The screen on the device blinked. Countdown. 10 seconds. Mason dropped a flare into the machine's vent, confusing its internal systems. He jumped off just as the EMP exploded. The machine staggered, then locked up. Its weapons froze, its legs shut down, and it collapsed to the ground like a dying beast. Dust filled the air. The All-Rothy stood frozen in shock. Then cheers. Loud, thunderous cheers. Even Thurnok pounded his chest, grinning. Valkyra marched toward Mason, who was lying on the ground, coughing and smiling. She pulled him up. To his feet, you ran into a war machine. She said, alone. Yeah, Mason said, wincing. I don't really think things through sometimes. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder. Today, you roared louder than giants. You have no size, but your heart is larger than the sky. The tribe began chanting, Roarborn, Roarborn. A new name, a warrior's name. That evening, Mason sat beside the fire, food in his lap. Warriors sharing stories around him. Children giggled nearby, one of them climbing onto his shoulder like a tree branch. He laughed softly. This place was becoming something strange to him. Home. Valkyra sat beside him, her gaze calm. You passed the trial of choice, she said. I did. You chose us, Mason nodded. I think I chose you, she said nothing, but her hand reached for his under the firelight. And for the first time, neither of them pulled away. Asterix night had fallen over the All-Rothy camp. The stars above were bright and clear, but inside Valkyra's tent, the air was thick with quiet tension. Mason sat on a low cushion, tired but alert. He had never seen Valkyra like this without her armor. Without her command, her long hair was loose, falling over her shoulders. Her golden eyes held something softer tonight, something vulnerable. She spoke first, her voice low and honest. I have fought many wars. Mason led my people through storms and carried the weight of 1,000 lives. Mason nodded, listening carefully. But I never wanted a mate, she said, eyes fixed on the ground. Not like this. Not forced by words or tradition. He looked at her, surprised. Why? She smiled faintly. Because power demands sacrifice, and I feared love was a weakness. Mason reached out gently. Love can be strength too. She looked up, meeting his gaze. Perhaps, she said softly. But I needed to see it. They sat in silence, the sounds of the camp outside a distant hum. Mason felt the weight of her words. This giant warrior, so fierce and proud, had carried a secret fear deeper than any battlefield wound. Suddenly, the tent flap opened. Thurnak entered, his stone-like skin gleaming in the firelight. "General," he said respectfully, "there is a visitor." Valkyra nodded. "Bring them in." A slender figure stepped inside, cloaked and hooded. The light caught her face's sharp features, eyes bright with curiosity. She was an elder from a neighboring clan, known for wisdom and peace. "We have heard of your warrior mate," the elder said to Mason, "and we come with a message." Mason's heart beat faster. What message? The elder looked at Valkyra, then back at Mason. "The rival clan offers a truce. If you accept a challenge." Valkyra frowned. "A challenge?" "Yes," said the elder. "A duel, one champion from each side. Winner decides the fate of the valley." Valkyra's jaw tightened. "And if I lose, then your people must surrender." Mason stood. "This sounds like another trial." Valkyra nodded slowly. "It is," she said, "but this time I cannot fight alone." She turned to Mason. "Will you stand with me?" Mason swallowed. "Of course," he said, "but I'm not a warrior like you. You have the heart." She replied, "And that is worth more than any blade." The day of the duel arrived. The valley was filled with watching warriors from both clans. The air was thick with tension, the silence louder than thunder. Valkyra stood on one side, her armor shining under the sun. Mason stood beside her, smaller but determined. Across from them was a towering warrior, covered in black armor and scars. His eyes burned with hate. The duel began. Valkyra charged first, axe swinging with deadly grace. Her opponent blocked and countered, metal clashing, sparks flying. Mason stayed close, watching, waiting for his moment. Suddenly, the enemy reached for Valkyra. She stumbled, caught off balance. Mason rushed forward. Grabbing a fallen spear, he threw it with all his strength. The spear struck the enemy's shoulder. The giant cried out and faltered. Valkyra smiled fiercely and struck the final blow. The enemy fell, defeated. The valley erupted in cheers. Valkyra raised Mason's hand high. "You fought beside me and saved my life," she said, voice loud enough for all to hear. "Together, we are stronger." That evening, the camp celebrated. Mason and Valkyra sat near the fire. Her hand found his once more. Warm and sure, she looked into his eyes. "Mason, I offer you a choice," she said. "You can leave with the next ship home, or stay and become my mate, not because of words, but because you choose it." Mason thought of Earth, of home, of safety, but he thought of the trials, the battles, the people who had accepted him, and of Valkyra strong, proud, and now something more. He took a deep breath. "I choose to stay," he said. "To fight, to learn, to be worthy of standing by your side." Valkyra smiled, her golden eyes shining with hope. "And I choose you," she said simply. "Not for tradition, but for love." The sun rose over the valley, painting the sky with orange and pink. The Orathi camp was alive with excitement. Today was the day Mason and Valkyra would stand before their people to make their bond official. The ground was packed with warriors giants. Of all sizes and ages, they formed a circle around a great stone altar carved with symbols older than memory. Drums beat a deep rhythm that echoed through the valley. The air was thick with smoke from burning herbs and fires. Mason stood beside Valkyra, feeling nervous but strong. He wore simple clothes, now no longer a stranger or a prisoner. Valkyra wore a new set of armor, bright and shining. Her golden eyes held pride and something softer, love, the tribe's elder, the same woman who brought the challenge before. stepped forward, she raised her hands, and the crowd fell silent. Today, the elder said in a voice that carried like thunder, we witness a bond forged not by force, but by choice, between a human and a giantess. Two souls who found honor and strength in each other. Valkyra took Mason's hand. Her grip firm and warm, she looked into his eyes. Do you vow to stand by me, to protect me and our people, to be more than a mate, to be a partner? Mason nodded, voice steady. I do. The elder turned to Valkyra. And do you vow to protect this man, to respect his courage, and to share your life with him, not as a queen and subject, but as equals? Valkyra smiled. I do. The elder raised her hands again. Then by the ancient laws of the Ulrithi, you are bonded. May your union bring peace and strength to the valley. The crowd erupted into cheers, drums pounding louder. Warriors thumped their chests and shouted. Children laughed and ran between the legs of giants. Mason looked at Valkyra, feeling a joy he had never known. She bent down and whispered, this is only the beginning. Mason smiled. I'm ready. After the ceremony, the camp held a great feast. Food was shared, stories told, and music filled the night. Mason found himself surrounded by new friends warriors who once doubted him, now shared laughter and drink. Valkyra stayed close, her hand in his. She told him stories of her childhood, the battles she fought, and the dreams she held. For the first time, Mason saw beyond the armor and power. He saw the woman, the queen, the giant, the warrior, and the friend. As the night deepened, they stood together watching the stars. Mason whispered, I never thought a simple compliment could change my life. Valkyra smiled. In our world, words are more powerful than swords. He squeezed her hand. And I will spend my life proving that words and love are worth everything. The days turned into weeks. Mason trained harder, learning to fight alongside the warriors. He still was small, but he was faster, smarter, and braver. Valkyra guided him, teaching him not just to fight, but to lead together. They planned the future of their people, building alliances, repairing old wounds, and preparing for the challenges ahead. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Valkyra turned to Mason. There is a vow I must make, she said. Eyes bright, he looked at her, curious. I vow to protect you, not because you are my mate, but because you are my equal. Mason smiled, touched her hand. And I vow to protect you, not because you are a queen, but because you are my heart. The wind whispered through the valley. Carrying their promises across the land, their story became legend among the Uruthi. The human who dared to speak a compliment and earned a giant's heart. The warrior who saw beyond size and strength. Together, they showed their people that courage, kindness, and love could change worlds. And in the quiet moments, when the stars shone bright and the drums were silent, Mason and Valkyra stood side by side too. Souls bound by honor, choice, and the power of a single polite compliment.